Mary ran back to her room so fast that she was rather out of breath when she reached it. Her hair was ruffled on her forehead, and her cheeks were bright pink. Her dinner was waiting on the table, and Martha was waiting near it.
That's a bit late. Where's the bin?
I've seen Dickon! I've seen Dickon!
I knew he'd come. How does the like him?
I think he's beautiful.
Well, he's the best lad as was ever born, but I never thought he was handsome. His nose turns up too much.
I like it to turn up.
And his eyes are so round, though they're a nice colour.
I like them round, and they're exactly the colour of the sky over the moor.
Mother says he made him that colour, with always looking up at the birds and the clouds. But he's got a big mouth, hasn't he now?
I love his big mouth. I wish mine would just like it.
It'd look rare and funny in that bit of a face. But I knowed it would be that way when they saw him. Sit down to thy dinner now while you tell me all about it. How did they like the garden tools?
How did you know he brought them?
I never thought of him not bringing them. He'd be sure to bring him if they was in Yorkshire. He's such a trusty lad. Did he show thee all the seed packets?
Yes, and he told me all about how to plant them.
Where will you do your planting?
I haven't asked anybody yet.
Well, I wouldn't ask the head gardener. He's too grand, Mr. Roach is.
I've never seen him. I've only seen undergardeners and Ben Weatherstaff.
If I was you, I'd ask Ben Weatherstaff. He's not half as bad as he looks, for all he's so crabbed. Mr. Craven lets him do what he liked because he was here when Miss Craven was alive, and he used to make her laugh. She liked him. Perhaps he'd find you a corner somewhere out of the way.
If it was out of the way, and no one wanted it, no one could mind me having it, could they?
There wouldn't be no reason. You wouldn't do no harm. Listen, I've got something to tell you. Mr. Craven came back this morning, and I think he wants to see you.
Oh, why? Why? He didn't want to see me when I came. I heard Pitcher said he didn't.
Well, Mrs. Medlock says it's because of mother. She was walking to Thwaite village and she met him. She never spoke to him before, but Mrs. Craven had been to our cottage 2 or 3 times. He'd forgot, but mother hadn't, and she made bold to stop him. I don't know what she said to him about you, but she said something has put him in the mind to see you before he goes away again, tomorrow.
Oh, is he going away tomorrow? I am so glad.
He's gone for a long time. He mayn't come back till autumn or winter. He's going to travel in foreign places. He's always doing it.
Oh, I am so glad.
If he did not come back until winter or even autumn, there would be time to watch the secret garden come alive. Even if he found out then and took it away from her, she would have had that much at least.
Good day, Mrs. Medlock.
Your hair's rough. Go and brush it. Martha, help her to slip on her best dress. Mr. Craven sent me to bring her to him in his study.
All the pink left Mary's cheeks. Her heart began to thump, and she felt herself changing into a stiff, silent child again. She did not even answer Mrs. Medlock, but turned and walked into her bedroom, followed by Martha. She said nothing while her dress was changed and her hair brushed, and after she was quite tidy, she followed Mrs. Medlock down the corridors in silence. What was there for her to say? She was obliged to go and see Mr. Craven, and he would not like her, and she would not like him. She knew what he would think of her. She was taken to a part of the house she had not been into before. At last, Mrs. Medlock knocked at the door, and they entered the room together. A man was sitting in an armchair before the fire, and Mrs. Medlock spoke to him.
This is Miss Mary, sir.
You can go and leave her here. I will ring for you when I want you to take her away. When
she went out and closed the door, Mary could only stand waiting. a plain little thing, twisting her thin hands together. She could see that the man in the chair was not so much a hunchback as a man with high, rather crooked shoulders, and he had black hair streaked with white.
Are you well?
Yes.
Do they take good care of you?
Yes.
You are very thin.
I am getting fatter.
What an unhappy face he had. His black eyes seemed as if they scarcely saw her, as if they were seeing something else, and he could hardly keep his thoughts upon her.
I forgot you. How could I remember you? I intended to send you a governess or a nurse, or someone of that sort, but I forgot.
Please! Please!
What do you want to say?
I am too big for a nurse, and please, please don't make me have a governess yet.
That was what the Sowerby woman said.
Is she Martha's mother?
Yes, I think so.
She knows about children. She is 12. She knows.
What do you want to do?
I want to play out of doors. I never liked to in India. It makes me hungry here, and I am getting fatter.
Mrs. Sowerby said it would do you good. Perhaps it will. She thought you had better get stronger before you had a governess.
It makes me feel strong when I play, and the wind comes over the moor.
Where do you play?
Everywhere. Martha's mother sent me a skipping rope. I skip and run, and I look about to see if things are beginning to stick up out of the earth. I don't do any harm.
Don't look so frightened. You could not do any harm, a child like you. You may do what you like.
May I?
Don't look so frightened. Of course you may. I am your guardian, though I am a poor one for any child. I cannot give you time or attention. I sent for you today because Mrs. Sowerby said I ought to see you. Her daughter had talked about you. She thought you needed fresh air and freedom and running about.
She knows all about children.
She ought to. I thought her rather bold to stop me on the moor, but she said had been kind to her. She is a respectable woman. Now I've seen you, I think she said sensible things. Play out of doors as much as you like. It's a big place, and you may go where you like and amuse yourself as you like. Is there anything you want? Do you want toys, books, dolls?
Might I have a bit of earth?
Earth? What do you mean?
To plant seeds in, to make things grow, to see them come alive.
Do you care about gardens so much?
I didn't know about them in India. I was always ill and tired. I sometimes made little beds in the sand and stuck flowers in them. But here it is different.
A bit of earth. You can have as much earth as you want. You remind me of someone else who loved the earth and things that grow. When you see a bit of earth you want, take it, child. Make it come alive.
May I take it from anywhere, if it's not wanted?
Anywhere. There! You must go now, for I am tired. I shall be away all summer, so this is goodbye for now.
Yes, sir?
Mrs. Medlock, now that I have seen the child, I understand what Mrs. Sowerby meant. She needs liberty and fresh air and romping about. Don't look after her too much. Mrs. Sowerby is to come and see her now and then, and she may sometimes go to the cottage.
Mrs. Medlock looked pleased. She was relieved to hear that she need not look after Mary too much. She had felt her to be a tiresome charge, and had indeed seen as little of her as she dared. In addition to this, she was fond of Martha's mother.
Thank you, sir. Susan Sowerby and me went to school together, and she's as sensible and good-hearted a woman as you'd find in a day's walk. She's what you might call healthy-minded, if you understand me.
I understand. Take Miss Mary away now, and send Pitcher to me.
I can have my garden!
You're back.
I may have it where I like. I am not going to have a governess for a long time. Your mother is coming to see me, and I may go to your cottage. He says a little girl like me could not do any harm, and I may do what I like. Anywhere.
That was nice of him, wasn't it?
Martha, he really is a nice man. Only his face is so miserable, and his forehead is all drawn together.
She ran as quickly as she could to the garden. When she slipped through the door under the ivy, she saw the gardening tools were laid together under a tree, but there was no Dickon to be seen. He had gone away and the secret garden was empty, except for the robin, who had just flown across the wall and sat on a standard rose bush watching her.
He's gone. Oh, was he only a wood fairy after all? Wait, there's a piece of paper fastened to that bush with a thorn. Why, it's the note I sent to Dickon. He's written something on the other side. There's a drawing. I believe it's meant to be a bird sitting on a nest. The words underneath are a little hard to read. I will come back.
Mary took the picture back to the house when she went to her supper, and she showed it to Martha.
I never knew our Dickon was as clever as that. That there's a picture of a missel thrush on a nest, as large as life and twice as natural.
Then Mary knew Dickon had meant the picture to be a message. He had meant that she might be sure he would keep her secret. Her garden was his nest, and she was like a missel thrush. Oh, how she did like that queer common boy. She hoped he would come back the very next day, and she fell asleep looking forward to the morning. But you never know what the weather will do in Yorkshire, particularly in the springtime. She was awakened in the night by the sound of rain beating with heavy drops against her window. It was pouring down in torrents, and the wind was wuthering round the corners and in the chimneys of the huge old house. Mary sat up in bed and felt miserable and angry.
The rain is as contrary as I ever was. It came because it knew I did not want it.
She threw herself back on her pillow and buried her face. She did not cry, but she lay and hated the sound of the heavy beating rain. She hated the wind and its withering.
It sounds just like a person lost on the moor and wandering on, crying. It isn't the wind now. That isn't the wind. It is different. It is that crying I heard before.
She felt as if she must find out what it was. It seemed even stranger than the secret garden and the buried key. Perhaps the fact that she was in a rebellious mood made her bold. She put her foot out of bed and stood on the floor.
I am going to find out what it is. Everybody is in bed, and I don't care about Mrs. Medlock. I don't care.
There was a candle by her bedside, and she took it up and went softly out of the room. The corridor looked very long and dark, but she was too excited to mind that. She thought she remembered the corners, and she must turn to find the short corridor with the door covered with tapestry. She went on with her dim light, almost feeling her way, her heart beating so loud that she fancied she could hear it.
Is this the right corner to turn? Yes, I remember that picture. Down this passage, then to the left, then up these two broad steps, left or right. Has the crying stopped? There it is again! To the right, then. And there is this tapestry door. The crying is coming from that room, and there is a glimmer of light under the door.
It was a big room with ancient, handsome furniture in it. There was a low fire glowing faintly on the hearth, and a nightlight posted by the side of the carved, four-posted bed hung with brocade curtains, and on the bed was lying a boy, crying fretfully. The boy had a sharp, delicate face, the color of ivory, and he seemed to have eyes too big for it. He also had a lot of hair, which tumbled over his forehead in heavy locks and made his thin face seem smaller. He looked like a boy who had often been ill, but he was crying more as if he were tired and cross than as if he were in pain. Mary crept across the room until the light of her candle attracted the boy's attention, and turned his eyes on his pillow to stare at her with wide gray eyes.
Who are you? Are you a ghost?
No, I am not. Are you?
No. I'm Colin.
Who is Colin?
I am Colin Craven. Who are you?
I am Mary Lennox. Mr. Craven is my uncle.
He is my father.
Your father?
I'm closer. You are real, aren't you?
I will pinch you a little if you like, to show you how real I am. For a minute, I thought you might be a dream too.
Where did you come from?
From my own room. The wind weathered, so I couldn't go to sleep, and I heard someone crying and wanted to find out who it was. What were you crying for?
Because I couldn't go to sleep either, and my head ached. Tell me your name again.
Mary Lennox. Did no one ever tell you I had to come to live here?
No, they daren't.
Why?
Because I should have been afraid you would see me. I won't let people see me and talk me over.
Why?
Because I'm like this always, ill and having to lie down. My father won't let people talk me over either. The servants are not allowed to speak about me. If I live, I may be a hunchback. But I shan't live. My father hates to think I might be like him.
Oh, what a queer house this is. Everything is a kind of secret. Rooms are locked up and gardens are locked up. And have you been locked up?
No, I stay in this room because I don't want to be moved out of it. It tires me too much.
Does your father come and see you?
Sometimes. Generally when I'm asleep. He doesn't want to see me.
Why?
My mother died when I was born, and it makes him wretched to look at me. He thinks I don't know, but I've heard people talking. He almost hates me.
He hates the garden because she died.
What garden?
Oh, just a garden she used to like. Have you been here always?
Nearly always. Sometimes I have been to places at the seaside, but I don't stay because people stare at me. I used to wear an iron thing to keep my back straight, but a grand doctor came from London to see me and said it was stupid. He told them to take it off and keep me out in the fresh air. I hate fresh air and I don't want to go out.
I didn't like when I first came here. Why do you keep looking at me like that?
Because of the dreams that are so real. Sometimes, when I open my eyes, I don't believe I'm awake.
We're both awake. It looks quite like a dream in here, and it's the middle of the night, and everybody in the house is asleep. Everybody but us. We are wide awake.
I don't want it to be a dream.
If you don't like people to see you, do you want me to go?
No. I should be sure you were a dream if you went. If you are real, sit down on that big footstool and talk. I want to hear about you.
All right. What do you want me to tell you?
He wanted to know how long she had been at Misselthwaite. He wanted to know which corridor her room was on. He wanted to know what she had been doing, if she disliked them more as he disliked it, where she had lived before she came to Yorkshire. She answered all these questions and many more, and he lay back on his pillow and listened. She found that because he had been an invalid, he had not learned things as other children had. One of his nurses had taught him to read when he was quite little, and he was always reading and looking at pictures in splendid books.
They give me lots of things to amuse myself with, but I hardly ever am amused.
What kind of things?
Anything I like.
Do you always get what you want?
Always. Everyone is obliged to do what pleases me. It makes me ill to be angry. No one believes I shall grow up. How old are you?
I am 10, and so are you.
How did you know that?
Because when you were born, the garden door was locked and the key was buried, and it has been locked for 10 years.
What garden door was locked? Who did it? Where was the key buried?
It was a garden Mr. Craven hates. He locked the door. No one knew where he buried the key.
What sort of garden is it?
No one has been allowed to go into it for 10 years.
But it was too late to be careful. He was too much like herself. He too had had nothing to think about, and the idea of a hidden garden attracted him as it had attracted her. He asked question after question.
Where is it? Have you ever looked for the door? Have you ever asked the gardeners?
They won't talk about it. I think they've been told not to answer questions.
I would make them.
Could you?
Mary faltered, beginning to feel frightened. If he could make people answer questions, who knew what might happen?
Everyone is obliged to please me. I told you that. If I were to live, this place would sometime belong to me. They all know that. I would make them tell me.
Mary had not known that she herself had been spoiled, but she could see quite plainly that this mysterious boy had been. He thought the whole world belonged to him, how peculiar he was, and how coolly he spoke of not living.
Do you think you won't live?
She asked partly because she was curious, and partly in hope of making him forget the garden.
I don't suppose I shall. Ever since I remember anything, I've heard people say I shan't. At first they thought I was too little to understand, and now they think I don't hear. But I do. My doctor is my father's cousin. He's quite poor, and if I die, he will have all Misselthwaite when my father is dead. I should think he wouldn't want me to live.
Do you want to live?
No, but I don't want to die. When I feel ill, I lie here and think about it until I cry and cry.
I have heard you crying about 3 times, but I did not know who it was. Were you crying about that?
She did so want him to forget the garden.
I dare say. Let us talk about something else. Talk about that garden. Don't you want to see it?
Yes.
I do. I don't think I ever really wanted to see anything before, but I want to see that garden. I want the key dug up. I want the door unlocked. I would let them take me there in my chair. That would be getting fresh air. I'm going to make them open the door.
He had become quite excited, and his strange eyes began to shine like stars and looked more immense than ever.
They have to please me. I will make them take me there, and I will let you go too.
Mary's hands clutched each other. Everything would be spoiled. Everything. Dickon would never come back. She would never again feel like a missel thrush with a safe hidden nest.
Oh, don't do that.
Why? You said you wanted to see it.
I do, but if you make them open the door and you in like that, it will never be a secret again.
A secret?
You see?
What do you mean?
You see, if no one knows but ourselves, if there was a door hidden somewhere under the ivy, if there was, and we could find it, and if we could slip through it together and shut it behind us, and no one knew anyone was inside, and we called it our garden, and pretended that we were missel thrushes, and it was our nest, and if we played there almost every day, and dug and planted seeds and made it all come alive...
Is it dead?
It soon will be if no one cares for it. The bulbs will live, but the roses...
What are bulbs?
They are daffodils and lilies and snowdrops. They are working in the earth now, pushing up pale green points because the spring is coming.
Is the spring coming? What is it like? You don't see it in rooms if you are ill.
It is the sun shining on the rain, and the rain falling on the sunshine, and things pushing up and working together under the earth. If the garden was a secret, and we could get into it, we could watch the things grow bigger every day, and see how many roses are alive. Don't you see? Oh, don't you see how much nicer it would be if it was a secret?
I never had a secret. Except that one about not living to grow up. They don't know I know that, so it is sort of a secret, but I like this kind better.
If you won't make them take you to the garden, perhaps... I feel almost sure I can find out how to get in sometime. And then, if the doctor wants you to go out in your chair, and if you can always do what you want to do, perhaps we might find some boy who would push you, and we could go alone, and it would always be a secret garden.
I should. Like that. I should like that. I should not mind fresh air in a secret garden. Here, I am going to let you look at something. Do you see that rose-coloured silk curtain hanging on the wall over the mantelpiece?
Yes.
There is a cord hanging from it. Go and pull it. That's a painting of my mother. I don't see why she died. Sometimes I hate her for it.
How queer.
If she had lived, I believe I should not have been ill always. I dare say I should have lived too. My father would not have hated to look at me. I dare say I should have had a strong back. Draw the curtain again.
Her eyes are just like yours, big and grey, with black lashes all around. They make your eyes look bigger. Why is the curtain drawn over her?
I made them do it. Sometimes I don't like to see her looking at me. She smiles too much when I am ill and miserable. Besides, she is mine, and I don't want everyone to see her.
What would Mrs. Medlock do if she found out that I had been here?
She would do as I told her to do. And I should tell her that I wanted you to come here and talk to me every day. I am glad you came.
So am I. I will come as often as I can, but I shall have to look every day for the garden door.
Yes, you must. And you can tell me about it afterward. I think you will be a secret too. At first. Do you know Martha?
Yes, I know her very well. She waits on me.
She's the one who's asleep in the other room. The nurse went away yesterday to stay all night with her sister, and she always makes Martha attend to me when she wants to go out. Martha shall tell you when to come here.
Martha knew about you all this time?
Yes, she often attends to me. The nurse likes to get away from me, and then Martha comes.
I have been here a long time. Shall I go away now? Your eyes look sleepy.
I wish I could go to sleep before you leave me.
Shut your eyes, and I will talk to you in a soft voice, the way my ayah used to when I couldn't sleep.
I should like that, perhaps.
I'll tell you what I think the garden would be like, if we could get into it. It has been shut up so long. Things have grown into a tangle. Perhaps the roses have climbed from tree to tree and hang down in curtains. Birds build their nests there because it is so safe. There's a robin who lives there, who is friends with the gardener, Ben Weatherstaff. He comes and chirps and sings to him while he works, and one day he flew right up onto the handle of his spade.
Never knew birds could be like that.
The moor was hidden in mist when the morning came, and the rain had not stopped pouring down. There would be no going out of doors. Martha was so busy that Mary had no opportunity of talking to her, but in the afternoon she asked her to come and sit with her in the nursery.
What's the matter with thee? That looks as if tha'd something to say.
I have found out what the crying was.
Thou hasn't. Never.
I heard it in the night, and I got up and went to see where it came from. It was Colin. I found him.
Miss Mary, thou shouldn't have done it. Thou shouldn't. Thou'll get me in trouble. I never told thee nothing about him, but thou'll get me in trouble. I shall lose my place, and what'll mother do?
You won't lose your place. He was glad I came. We talked and talked, and he said he was glad I came.
Was he? Art thou sure? Thou doesn't know what he's like when anything vexes him. He's a big lad to cry like a baby, but when he's in a passion, he'll fair scream just to frighten us. He knows us daren't call our souls our own.
He wasn't vexed. I asked him if I should go away, and he made me stay. He asked me questions, and I sat on a big footstool and talked to him about India, and about the robin and the gardens. He let me see his mother's picture. I talked to him until he fell asleep.
I can scarcely believe thee. And Mrs. Medlock finds out?
He says everybody is obliged to do as he pleases.
That's true enough. The bad lad.
He wants me to come and talk to him every day.
Does that mean that he was nice to thee?
I think he almost liked me.
Then thou must have bewitched him.
Do you mean magic? I've heard about magic in India, but I can't make it. What is the matter with him?
Nobody knows for sure and certain. Mr. Craven went off his head like when he was born. Because Mrs. Craven died, like I told you, he raved and said it'd be another hunchback like him, and he'd better die.
Is Colin a hunchback? He didn't look like one.
He isn't yet, but he began all wrong. Mother said that there was enough trouble and raging in the house to set any child wrong. They was afraid his back was weak, and they've always been taking care of it, keeping him lying down and not letting him walk. The doctor who came from London said that there'd been too much medicine and too much letting him have his own way.
I think he's a very spoiled boy.
He's the worst young knot as ever was. I won't say as he hasn't been ill a good bit. He's had coughs and colds that's nearly killed him 2 or 3 times. Once he had rheumatic fever, and once he had typhoid. Mrs. Medlock did get a fright then. He'd been out of his head, and she was talking to the nurse, thinking he didn't know nothing. And she said, he'll die this time, sure enough, and best thing for him and for everybody. And then she looked at him, and there he was with his big eyes open, staring at her, as sensible as she was herself. She didn't know what had happened, but he just stared at her and says, "You give me some water and stop talking."
Do you think he will die?
Mother says there's no reason why any child should live that gets no fresh air and doesn't do nothing but lie on his back and read picture books and take medicine.
I wonder if it would do him good to go out into a garden and watch things grow. It did me good.
One of the worst fits he ever had was one time they took him out where the roses is by the fountain. He'd been reading in a paper about people getting something he called rose cold, and he began to sneeze and said he'd got it. And then a new gardener, as didn't know the rules, passed by and looked at him curious. He threw himself into a passion and said he looked at him because he was going to be a hunchback. He cried himself into a fever and was ill all night.
If he ever gets angry with me, I'll never go and see him again.
He'll have thee if he wants thee. Thou may as well know that at the start. I dare say the nurse wants me to stay with him a bit. I hope he's in a good temper.
She was out of the room about 10 minutes, and then she came back with a puzzled expression.
Well, that has bewitched him. He's up on his sofa with his picture books. He's told the nurse to stay away until 6 o'clock, and the minute she was gone, he called me to him and says, I want Mary Lennox to come and talk to me. And remember, you're not to tell anyone. You'd better go as quick as you can.
Mary was quite willing to go quickly. She did not want to see Colin as much as she wanted to see Dickon, but she wanted to see him very much. There was a bright fire on the hearth when she entered his room, and in the daylight she saw it was a very beautiful room indeed. There were rich colors in the rugs and hangings and pictures and bookshelves on the walls that make it look glowing and comfortable, even in spite of the gray sky and falling rain. Colin looked rather like a picture himself. He was wrapped in a velvet dressing gown and sat against a big brocaded cushion. He had a red spot in each cheek.
Come in. I've been thinking about you all morning.
I've been thinking about you too. You don't know how frightened Martha is. She says Mrs. Medlock will think she told me about you, and then she will be sent away.
Martha, come here.
Yes, sir.
Have you to do what I please, or have you not?
I have to do what you please, sir.
Has Medlock to do what I please?
Everybody has, sir.
Well then, if I order you to bring Miss Mary to me, how can Medlock send you away if she finds out?
Please don't let her, sir.
I'll send her away if she dares to say a word about such a thing. She wouldn't like that, I can tell you.
Thank you, sir. I want to do my duty, sir.
What I want is your duty. I'll take care of you. Now, go away. Why are you looking at me like that? What are you thinking about?
I am thinking about two things. The first one is that once in India, I saw a boy who was a Rajah. He had rubies and emeralds and diamonds stuck all over him. He spoke to his people just as you spoke to Martha. Everybody had to do everything he told them in a minute. I think they would have been killed if they hadn't.
I shall make you tell me about Rajahs presently. But first, tell me what the second thing was.
I was thinking how different you are from Dickon.
Who is Dickon? What a strange name.
He is Martha's brother. He is 12 years old. He is not like anyone else in the world. He can charm foxes and squirrels and birds, just as the natives in India charm snakes.
There's a picture of a snake charmer in one of my books. Can he really do that?
He played on his pipe and they listened, but he doesn't call it magic. He says it's because he lives on the moor so much and he knows their ways. I think he asked the robin questions. It seemed as if they talked to each other in soft chirps.
Does he like the moor? How can he when it's such a great, bad, dreary place?
It's the most beautiful place. Thousands of lovely things grow on it, and there are thousands of little creatures, all busy building nests and making holes in burrows, and chippering or singing, or squeaking to each other. They are so busy, and having so much fun under the earth, or in the trees or heather. It's their world.
You never see anything if you're ill.
You can't if you stay in a room.
I couldn't go on the moor.
You might, sometime.
Go on the moor? How could I? I'm going to die.
How do you know?
Mary did not like the way he had talked of dying. She did not feel very sympathetic. She felt rather as if he had almost boasted about it.
I've heard it ever since I remember. They are always whispering about it and thinking I don't notice. They wish I would, too.
Mistress Mary felt quite contrary.
If they wished I would, I wouldn't. Who wishes you would?
The servants. And of course Dr. Craven, because he would get Misselthwaite and be rich instead of poor. He daren't say so, but he always looks cheerful when I'm worse. I think my father wishes it too.
I don't believe he does.
Don't you?
And then he lay back on his cushion and was still, as if he were thinking. And there was quite a long silence. Perhaps they were both of them thinking strange things children do not usually think.
I like the Grand Doctor from London, because he made them take the iron thing off. Did he say how you were going to die?
No, he didn't whisper either. Perhaps he knew I hated whispering. I heard him say one thing quite aloud. He said, "The lad might live if he would make up his mind to it. Put him in the humour." It sounded as if he was in a temper.
I'll tell you who would put you in a humour, perhaps. I believe Dickon would. He's always talking about live things. He never talks about dead things, or things that are ill. He's always looking up in the sky to watch birds flying, or looking down at the earth to see something growing. See here, don't let us talk about dying. I don't like it. Let us talk about living. Let us talk about Dickon, and then we can look at your picture.
It was the best thing she could have said. To talk about Dickon meant to talk about the moor, and about the cottage, and the 14 people who lived in it, and about Dickon's mother, and the skipping rope, and the moor with the sun on it, and about pale green points sticking up out of the sod. And it was all so alive that they both talked and listened as they never had before, and they both began to laugh over nothings, as children will when they are happy together, just as if they had been two ordinary, healthy, natural 10-year-old creatures, instead of a hard, unloving little girl and a sickly boy who believed he was going to die. Colin was actually sitting up as if he had forgotten his weak back, when he suddenly remembered something.
Do you know one thing we have never once thought of? We are cousins.
We are! Why, how do you do, Cousin Colin?
How do you do, Cousin Mary?
In the midst of the fun, the door opened and in walked Dr. Craven and Mrs. Medlock. Dr. Craven startled in actual alarm, and Mrs. Medlock almost fell back because he had accidentally bumped against her.
Good Lord!
What is this? What does it mean?
Then Mary was reminded of the boy Rajah again. Colin answered as if neither the doctor's alarm nor Mrs. Medlock's terror were of the slightest consequence. He was as little disturbed or frightened as if an elderly cat and dog had walked into the room.
This is my cousin, Mary Lennox. I asked her to come and talk to me. I like her. She must come and talk to me whenever I send for her.
Why, Miss Medlock?
Oh, sir, I don't know how it's happened. There's not a servant on the place that dare to talk. They all have their orders.
Nobody told her anything. She heard me crying and found me herself. I'm glad she came. Don't be silly, Medlock.
I'm afraid there has been too much excitement. Excitement is not good for you, my boy.
I should be excited if she kept away. I am better. She makes me better. The nurse must bring up her tea with mine. We will have tea together.
Well, he does look rather better, sir. But he looked better this morning before she came into the room.
She came into the room last night. She stayed with me a long time and then talked to me until I fell asleep. I was better when I wakened up. I wanted my breakfast. I want my tea now. Tell nurse, Medlock.
Well, I suppose it's all right. But you mustn't talk too much. And you mustn't forget you are ill. You must not forget you are very easily tired.
I want to forget it. She makes me forget it. That's why I want her.
Dr. Craven did not look happy when he left the room. He gave a puzzled glance at the little girl sitting in the large stool. She had become a stiff, silent child again as soon as he entered, and he could not see what the attraction was. The boy actually did look brighter, however, and he sighed rather heavily as he went down the corridor.
Here's our tea. They're always wanting me to eat things when I don't want to. Now, if you'll eat, I will. Those muffins look so nice and hot. Tell me about Rajas.